there was a day where the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, in this case angels, went to present themselves before God, and Satan went along with them. So for me, it seems like we're getting a glimpse into the heavenly realm here, but people do have a different opinion on that. What do you think? Are we dealing with figurative language that's used to just help us understand some kind of spiritual truths, or are we dealing with a literal picture in heaven? I don't know. Interesting to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hey everybody, it's Tim with Uniform Members for Christ. I'm so glad you could join me again this week as we're in session 7 of our Genesis walkthrough. Now last week we dealt with session 6, and we were in verses 28 through 31 of the first chapter of Genesis. If you recall, we dealt with the term bless you that is very commonly said, presumably throughout the United States, but especially here in the South where I'm at. And I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about, what that really meant. And so that's what we dealt with last week. What is the actual meaning of bless you? Well, from a biblical perspective, it's a lot more than just saying bless you or God bless you. There really is intent behind what you're saying. For instance, may God bless you with XYZ, right? And you can fill in the blanks there. Another example of this that I like to talk about, and I'm not trying to step on any toes, but I just want to give you a couple of examples about things that we can do that are fairly rigid and not necessarily according to what the intent is in the Bible. To give you an example, I taught a group a while back, and they like to sing hymns. We're singing all these hymns, and the guys do a fantastic job, but every time they get to Amazing Grace, every one of these people get up on their feet with that one song. And why is that? Right? It's just a tradition that they have. They place a certain amount of reverence upon that one hymn over all of the other ones. And there's nothing inherently wrong about that, right? But it's the form of something versus the substance of something. Are we reverencing God, or are we reverencing a song? Well, in this case, we're reverencing a song. When we worship God, regardless if it's a contemporary song or if it's a much older song, the intent is to bring praise and worship to the Father. So if we're standing, let's stand in reverence of God and awe of God. If we're sitting, let's sit in reverence of God and awe of God, and not be overly legalistic about either one of those things. So the next thing that we talked about last week was verse 31. I asked the question, is there any kind of connection between the mark of the beast found in the book of Revelation and Genesis 1:31? And if you are not familiar with that at all, or you're like, wow, what are we talking about right now? You'll have to go back and watch the first video. There's a lot to that. Okay, so let's get started today in session 7, chapter 2. So we're only going to deal with one verse today because I found something intriguing and I wanted to share it with you. And so verse 1 says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the host of them. So verse 1, chapter 2, verse 1 is basically a big old summary of everything that just happened over the last 6 days. That's all that's going on here, okay? But it does say something here that I just wanted to point out, and I thought we could have some fun today by kind of examining the phrase, and all the host of them. So what exactly does that mean? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a tendency to read something and kind of just gloss over it, but we don't want to do that in this teaching. If we can touch on it, that's exactly what I want to do. So that is what we're going to try to do today. The host. Okay, here we go. There's a couple of things that I want to point out to you. First of all, it's important to understand that the phrase host of heaven sometimes is dealing with more like celestial bodies, like the planets and the sun, the moon, and the stars, etc. However, at other times it's referring more specifically to an army, specifically a heavenly army. So although, by the way, there are a couple of instances where it is used of an earthly army, a host of people, okay? So this is not always 100% of the time, as is the case with most of these phrases in the Bible. So you have to do your own homework here, but we're going to just talk about today the celestial body idea and then the heavenly army idea. So here's some passages that will talk more likely about the celestial bodies. One of them is Deuteronomy 4:19, and it says, and beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars and all of the host of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all peoples under the whole heavens. Okay, so in that instance, it seems more likely that we're dealing specifically with all of the the things that we would look up into the night sky and see, for instance, or daytime to see the sun. Nehemiah 9:6 is another example of this, I believe. It says, "You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens." Okay, so the highest heavens, with all of their host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them, and you preserve all of them, and the host of heaven worships you. What's interesting about this is it's talking about the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them, and you preserve all of them. So, is that talking about animals or things that are living? And is that talking about what's in the sea, the things that are living? And you preserve all of them, and the host of heaven worships you. So are we just talking about celestial bodies in some kind of figurative way, as if they have the ability to worship God? Or are we really talking about angelic beings that God created that worships him? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. This one was kind of, I was a little bit on the fence about it. Here are some passages that I believe deal specifically with the actual armies of God. And that's 1 Kings 22:19 is perhaps one of the most interesting. I'm going to butcher this name as far as the Hebrew pronunciation. We're going to say Micaiah, but you can read it for yourself. It's actually Micaiah. I'm going to say Micaiah. And Micaiah said, "Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right and his left." Okay, so, some will prefer to think about this as a figurative language where anthropomorphic qualities are assigned to God. Anthropomorphic basically is exactly that, when we attribute human-like qualities to God. I have a tendency to think that what we're seeing here is genuine industry of the heavens. I mean, I'll give you a few examples why I think that. One, we find in the book of Genesis 18 that God comes down with two angels, and he said that there had been a report about Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plains that had come up before him, and he wanted to come see if it was as had been reported or not. And that seems to imply these angels go to and fro from heaven. That's certainly what we see in Genesis when Jacob sees a ladder go into heaven where angels are ascending and descending. It is certainly consistent with the New Testament, where we find out that angels are ministering spirits assigned to those who are inheriting salvation. And it also seems consistent with a book that does have a lot of figurative language, but the book of Job, where we see that there was a day where the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, in this case angels, went to present themselves before God, and Satan went along with them. So for me, it seems like we're getting a glimpse into the heavenly realm here, but people do have a different opinion on that. What do you think? Are we dealing with figurative language that's used to just help us understand some kind of spiritual truths, or are we dealing with a literal picture in heaven? I don't know. Interesting to hear your thoughts in the comments. From a New Testament perspective, we have something which I think many of you will be intimately familiar with because you hear it every year. Even if you only go to church once a year, right? You've heard this. Luke 2:13, "And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom he is pleased." There's no indication here of figurative language or some kind of figurative event. This recorded exactly like we should read it. These shepherds are in the field, and angels appear to them. This should not be something that really throws us for a loop. Angels are literal beings. They actually have bodies. They're spiritual beings. They can show up and minister to you. They've appeared to people at various times, and the Bible makes it clear that you and I have entertained possibly angels when we've opened up our home and been hospitable. So another very intriguing passage is found in the account of David versus Goliath. Boy, I loved this when I was a kid, right? The sling. I mean, every children's church, I feel like, look, I'm from that old school generation that we had like the felt board. I don't know if any of you remember that. We had all these little felt cutouts, and my nanny, she used to teach Sunday school, and I remember her putting, the little David up there and the little Goliath up there. And today, wow, how far have we come with technology? It's amazing. In fact, I think it's Angel TV who just came out with David, the animated series, and it details David's journey from when he was fighting lions and bears all the way up to becoming the king of Israel. I'm not sure if it goes that far, but it gives his history, and it's a really cool little show. But let's get on with it. It says in 1 Samuel 17:36, it says, "Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." And in this case, we're using Israel primarily as the army that is being defied. Then in verse 45, David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel whom you have defied. All right, let's jump over to Revelation 19:14. This is very interesting. And it says, and the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. So which concept are we dealing with in Genesis 2:2? Well, I think it's probably safer for Genesis 2:2 to say that we're primarily dealing with the host, as in all of the things on earth and all of the things in heaven as the stars, moon, sun, planets, nebulas, galaxies, whatever. But let me say this, could this have implied God created heaven's armies or angels at the same time he created the heavens and the earth? Yeah, sure, I suppose that's the case. I know that Dr. Chuck Missler felt that way. Obviously, we have the deception that took place in the garden in Genesis 3 that we're going to get into later. Most people would agree that Satan had some type of involvement in that event. We're going to talk a lot about that when we get there. Probably have multiple parts of this teaching just dedicated to that area. But the thing that I would mention would be this: if everything was created perfect in the first 6 days of creation, and then there's a fall that takes place by 3, if Satan had already had an involvement in that by verse 3, then sometime between this unspecified amount of time between the creation of humanity, the creation of angels, and then the fall in Genesis 3, something radical has to take place in there somewhere for this being to suddenly become malevolent and malicious and deceptive. And so, the good news is we don't have a specified amount of time. We do, and this is where there's no shortage of theories as to what we're talking about if we're doing 6 literal days of creation. Some people want to imply that it means 1,000 years as a day because there's some scripture that they'll use for that. Some people will say there's an unspecified amount of time for each creative day. I will say you run into some problems there when you start thinking about Erev and Boker, which, the phrase is evening and morning, because that happens every day on each day of creation. Anyway, all of these theories are plagued with issues, to be fair about it, but one thing that I think will benefit us is understanding that whenever the angels were created, including Lucifer, sometime between the time he was created and sometime between Genesis chapter 3, enough has happened that he has now become the antagonist in the story. So I don't know, but we do know that everything was created by Christ. We know that all things were created by him. Colossians 1:15 through 16 tells us that, and John 1:1 through 3 tells us that God, through the Word, or Jesus Christ as we know him, created all things. So before we wrap up today, there are 2 more verses that I want to point out which could deal with this host of heaven issue from the perspective of heaven's armies. The first is an Old Testament example found in 2 Kings 6:16 through 17. This is another one of my favorite Old Testament stories because it's so amazing. Elijah is in a city with his servant, and the king of Syria's armies have went and surrounded this area. And in this instance, the servant is rightfully panicking, and Elijah prays and asks the Lord to open up his eyes that he can see. And it says the servant of Elijah sees that the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elijah. So again, heaven has an army. It's not exactly what we think, but many things on earth have been patterned after a heavenly example. In this situation, there are these horses and chariots of fire. So there's this amazing fiery scene happening, and it says those things were surrounding Elijah. So anyway, the king of Syria had no chance. He just didn't realize what was happening because he couldn't see into the spirit realm. And Elijah had every reason in the world to be confident. Now, here we go. I want to wrap it up with this. This is going to be a big one. The last place I want us to look is Jesus on the cross. And Jesus makes a profound statement in Matthew 26:53. He says, "Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels?" The common size probably of a Roman legion during that period was between 5,000 to 6,000 troops. Take the low end of that on 5,000 soldiers. And we know that that's times 12, although he said he could call more than that. But let's just use that. That's 60,000 angels. Okay, that's a lot of angels, but it really doesn't mean anything to us, right? Because there's armies that are a lot bigger than 60,000, right? So let's look at some examples of why that could be a lot. If we look in 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 35, and then it's also mentioned in Isaiah 37, 36 through 38, and 2 Chronicles 32, 31. We have an event recorded where an angel of the Lord killed 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in one night that were encamped against Israel. So that's a lot, okay? But we're not going to take that number because that number is extraordinary. We're going to look at another example from 2 Samuel chapter 24 and 1 Chronicles chapter 21. We find that David has taken a census of Israel, and because of that, the wrath of God has been poured out upon him. And in this example, over the course of 3 days, roughly, we have 70,000 Israelites that lost their life to this plague because of the disobedience of the nation. So, if we take the low number of that and assume that one angel could eradicate about 23,000 people a day, okay, then, let me stop there really quick. This is assuming that this is a regular angel, if there is any such thing as a regular angel, which I don't know if there is, and not some like super special angel that was created for this particular purpose. But just assuming that one angel could do this, if we took 23,000 people and we multiply that times 60,000, we get 1.38 billion. Okay. Around the time of Jesus, there was between probably, and again, numbers fluctuate, but about 200 to 300 million people on the earth. So if 60,000 angels, if they could wipe out 1.38 billion, and there's only between 200 to 300 million people on the earth, then what we're seeing here is that 60,000 angels potentially could have wiped out the earth 6 to 7 times over in one day. But it's not about that, right? It's not about saying, oh man, look how powerful angels are. What it's about is this. If Jesus was trying to make a statement that he wants us to understand by making that statement, I can call more than 12 legions of angels, what would that be possibly? Well, it could potentially be this. What he was saying is, you do not have enough people on this entire planet to hold me on this cross if I did not want to be here. What does that imply? Jesus wasn't being arrogant or cocky. What was he implying? He was implying that you've got to understand the thing that is holding me on this cross is love. Love for my Father, because, right, he was obedient even to the point of death upon a cross. And John 3:16 tells us that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but should have everlasting life. So what is Jesus saying? I could call upon my Father and he would send to my rescue 60,000 angels that could eradicate the entire population of this earth 6 to 7 times over. But I'm staying on this cross. Nails didn't hold him to the cross, right? Love held him to that cross. And so we have to understand that Jesus Christ willingly, the Son of the Most High God, who sets aside his glory and takes on flesh and humbles himself to the point of a servant by even washing feet, is now on a cross, given his life for humanity, willingly. If you are interested about knowing about salvation and you're just not sure where to start, just go ahead and Google the Romans Road. That's probably a really good place to start, and it will help you understand what salvation is and your responsibility toward God in salvation. And that's it for today. And I will say, yes, God bless you, but God bless you with a deeper understanding of who he is through his word as you study and watch videos like this and spend time with him. All right, guys, until next week, take care.